All right, well, welcome everyone to the future of HVAC commissioning. Direct measurement capture is here. Real quick, before we get started, we always want to say a big thank you to our top tier sponsors, especially Rheem, the heat pump water heaters of the future are here. They take natural heat out of the air, use it to heat water with zero emissions directly up to 400% efficiency. Rheem offers water heaters with backup electric resistance at 240 volts to ensure hot water all the time. They also have a 120 volt system that quickly replaces existing gas without the sometimes expensive electrical updates needed to go with gas lines. The way that these work is they pull in heated air through a filter, and it's absorbed with an R410 refrigerant using a compressor to heat the coils wrapped around the tanks. You can control your system, heating levels, sense leak detection, track energy usage over time, and set up a schedule for a time of use program. I do that typically with mine to keep it off of using too much heat during the 2 to 7 peak periods. IRA benefits up to $2,000 tax credits for these Rheem heat pump water heaters, and up to $600 for an electric system if improvements are needed. Now, if you don't want to go with a heat pump water heater for various reasons, expense and cost, Rheem also features a standard electric tank system that has demand response time use programming in it, again, to help keep you and your clients' water heating off of the peak load. Check it out over at Rheem Heat Pump Water Heaters today. And then also a big thanks to our sponsors, Build Equinox with the Serve 2. This is sort of an all-in-one ventilation system for heating, cooling, and ventilation and air filtration. And they just got a big upgrade. So these systems now can go in much larger homes and bigger facilities. And we're going to be doing some more education on that later. So check them out over at buildequinox.com. All right, again, the future of HVAC commissioning, direct measurement capture is here. This session is brought to you by the Green Home Institute. The Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. Today, I will be your moderator. My name is Brett Little, and I am the education manager here as part of our small but mighty team of 3. This course is approved for multiple continuing education units, including our Certified Green Home Professional Designation, Energy and Health. AIA Health, Welfare, and Safety may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license. And Passive House, you'll receive that 5-digit code at the end. So before we get started, a couple of things. HVAC commissioning really lived with the commercial world, right? That's really where it was very prevalent. Especially when it comes to the green building programs. That's where HVAC commissioning happened. That's where the conversation has been. And typically wall commissioning, right? Commissioning our envelope systems always lived in the residential world. And so what's happening now, the direction we're headed to now, is that in our residential homes and buildings, it's becoming more and more important to commission not just the wall assembly, but the HVAC systems as well. And that's the direction we ultimately need to head into. And so the way that that's getting done right now is on paper. And so the best well-known system is the Energy Star program, which came out quite a long time ago to sort of make sense of all this in the residential sector. And so you have what you would first hopefully start out with is a design report, whether it's on an existing home or especially on a new home, properly designing that HVAC system and documenting that accordingly. And then from there, we want to make sure that once the system is installed, it's properly commissioned by the HVAC contractor, refrigerant charge testing, all that, and documented, and then submitted to the certification body, or just, again, ensuring that it's done properly and correctly. And so when it comes to LEED certification and where that ultimately fits in, we're looking at the minimum energy performance requirement. And there's quite a bit of things in the minimum energy performance requirement. But one thing that's key in there is that you must comply with Energy Star 3 certification. You don't have to certify, but you need to comply. And so where that falls with HVAC is, number one, The HVAC contractor doesn't need to be certified, but we'll talk about what that means a little bit later and where the benefits are there. But they do need to be aware of these commissioning reports and these design reports and submit them appropriately. Now, we're going to be talking about a little bit later today, too, about how you can drive down your energy score, your ANSI 301 Energy Rating Index score, which improves your lead points under the annual energy usage by having these properly commissioned HVAC systems, and of course, easier ways, which is why we're here on how to do this and how we might achieve this. So that's kind of where it fits in with LEED. If you are following our Green Star Home certification standard, we're looking at proper HVAC commissioning, especially on the heat pump or AC side, at the silver level requirement for Green Star Homes certification. And, you know, here's the deal, everybody. I'm a lead green rater. I go out there and I do this work. What are we doing at the end of a project? I've got one right now. We're chasing down the contractor to sign some paperwork that they should have completed in the field because, and in fairness and in empathy to them, they're overworked, they're busy, they're understaffed. They're trying to get this system in and move to the next job, and they don't have this document in front of them. They've probably done the appropriate commissioning, wrote it down somewhere, and then moved on. So here we are chasing them on the LEED project, on the Green Star project. You know, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months later, they finally fill it out, and then the owner gets their certificate after being very frustrated at everybody. And so it's just a bad system, a bad process, and I think we can do a lot better. Now, one of the ways we can do that is having factory pre-charged heat pump systems. Those are coming out. Mini split systems, which currently just don't really have a way of getting commissioned. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be, but it just isn't possible. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. That's one way to get away from all of this right now. Consider those systems. So with that, I am super excited to welcome our speaker today, Joe Madash with MeasureQuick. And to talk us through about where we're headed in the future and what tools can be used and systems can be put in place now. So, Joe, really glad to have you, and please take it away.
Okay, I am coming. Share, and hopefully you guys can confirm, see my screen. Is that out there? Okay, great, thanks. So, you know, I just want to say a special thanks to Brett and the entire Green Home Institute, because you guys are a lost resource. I mean, lots of people are here today, but the amount of stuff you guys cover regularly, cover it well, and the resources that you provide for so many contractors and raters and just people who want to learn more. I know there's a lot of homeowners who actually tune in here. So I just want to reach out, and everybody else can do the same. If you're in the chat, just say thank you for all you guys do. So I'm super appreciative. Brett and I have been trying to do a webinar for a long time, and it's been either a time or effort or challenges. So we're here. I am thrilled to be here. So let's get into this. So I've got a variety of stump boxes that I've been doing for years. Okay. Almost 10 years now, I've been focused on realizing that we're using these great devices that work with a mobile device in some way, and we're able to measure stuff, and we're able to digitally capture it. We're actually able to be like, wow, I no longer have to write down this information, give it to somebody else who may write it down again, and somebody else who enters it into a program, and you can see the thing. You're not only chasing somebody down to get it, but there's just so many places where this can fail. And we all know that it's shocking how many times things just happen to pass or just happen to be under 2.9 air changes per hour. That's shocking how many times that happens. So I really am focused everybody said that before I die, I'm hoping that the code says you need to find a direct capture method, right? The other thing on my stump box was we want to focus today is that energy benefits equal health benefits. So that's one of my main focuses is today that we are actually measuring stuff and we are capturing it, and we're just not yet willing to say, let's require it, but we are very close. This is now a change in the guard as to who does the work, who does the measuring, who is actually capturing it, and how is it done without somebody having to rewrite it or type it in someplace else. That's the risk of the failure. I thought it this morning, I'm like, you know what if you went to your doctor and every time you were there, he'd be like, oh, your blood pressure's perfect, or wow, that's great, your cholesterol is great, just to make you feel good or make everything be okay. That's the last thing you want, and the last thing a homeowner wants is for everybody to say, oh yeah, you passed, it's all good. So let's figure out a way to accept that we need to acknowledge what our real measurements are and figure out a way to make them better. The real concept here is that I've been doing this for almost 13 years, and I actually am a creator of the R Cloud app that RetroTech has. Energy Conservatory's got some too. I'm trying to avoid acronyms and information, but this is just my personal history. So we created this so it would directly capture whatever you do. If it was a duct test or blower door, all those things are done. And the two main companies in the industry are both doing that. 10 years later, at that time, 10 years ago, I was working with Jim Bergman and he was with MeasureQuick. And I'm like, okay, we need to figure out a way to move this to another level. So that's my quick story. That's where I'm at. And we are able to do these things. The history of how bad these things have been performing is going back as long as we've been able to document this stuff and keep track of it. Many of the reports that I could show you are actually typed out literally on a typewriter, keeping track of this kind of stuff. So, you can see the big stuff here, at least one fault in 70 to 90% of homes. At duct leakage is 90 to 100%. Refrigerant charge and insufficient vapor air evaporator airflow. Your airflow and your refrigerant charge are the really only two things you can control, and they have been off for years because we really don't measure them. We don't usually measure them together. There's just so many ways that we've been able to document this, and it's costing homeowners, billions of dollars. So the documentation's out there, right? It's been out there for a long time. So the question is, are you finding them or are you leaving them? That's the real reality here. So because they're there. And we're able to prove that we're doing better in a variety of studies that are out there because we know what the baseline is. So here's our residential story. A lot of these are DOE and a lot of these are independent studies, but they've all been backed by many other studies you'll see in a second. So approximately 20.7 terawatts of hours of energy per year due to equipment faults. And we just don't accept that. You don't know that your system is not really working at its efficiency. Most people aren't monitoring how much their HVAC system or their heating and cooling system is using. So it just goes on. It's if you have a high bill, and it's usually related to a high season cooling or heating. But in general, you think, well, that's just what it is. But we don't realize that system is actually not efficient as it should be. Jim Bergman, in his brilliance, in a matter of a few minutes, said, well, the amount of money we're losing is also related to the amount of water we're wasting. So if you're in the West, this is how this comes into play. Water also equals energy because that's their process of where they get it from. So 5.7 times the volume of Lake Mead at its highest level, which is 8.5 trillion gallons of water, right? That's equivalent to the amount of money that's lost. So don't think of it just like, oh, we're all paying a tiny bit every month. It's like, you know what? This is a major resource that we're using for energy and it's getting lost. Okay, so there's a whole nother level here as to why this needs to be corrected. Oh, wait, here's another set of things going all the way back to John Proctor, and others have been doing this for as long as he's probably been in the industry, 1995 and 97 on airflow and refrigerant charge. So clearly this has been something that is a constant, and we still are yet to fix it. We're not able to conquer the standards that are out there. So this unfortunately is the de facto standard. Like, yeah, it's good enough. Cold air, it's good enough. I can tell the refrigerant charge is okay. I got a superheat and a subcool. Moving on, I got to do the next job. So we need to figure out how to get past that. So the great scientists and researchers at Pacific Northwest Labs, PNNL, realized that there's a lot of new smart probes and tools that are out there that are Bluetooth, and they're talking to something. So the reality is they thought these were smart tools, and they were able to make the technician smarter, more able to do better diagnostics to actually reduce the poor installs that are happening. So this is a correct statement, but it's only half the story. Okay. Smart tools are only as smart as what's reading them. So a lot of the manufacturers have their own way of determining exactly what it's reading, but it looks more like this. So if I actually have an XYZ app and some probes, they're just giving me basic information. Same as these analog gauges in the middle, or this other one that's telling me my return and my supply temperatures. These are just direct numbers, but unless you knew what your temperature split should be, you don't know that. So these may be smart probes, but you need an intelligent app. That's my coin. I've actually coined that. You need an intelligent app to give you proper information. So unless your app is telling you what your current value is, but what's your target and what's your allowable range based on this system, it doesn't matter what you're measuring. You could use the analog gauge in the middle, which we've been doing for decades. But if you don't know what it should be, and this goes to a lot of different measurements that are happening rapidly as these systems are running. I'll go through a couple of quick bad habits here. So we think that, oh yeah, I got a checklist. In fact, Brett just showed you his list of stuff that's filled out. That's a great fillable PDF where you're actually checking off things that were done, putting in some measurements. And again, This doesn't confirm any measurements. It doesn't confirm it was done correctly or done adequately or actually met any kind of criteria, because it's just clicking a box. We're saying that, yes, I will tell you that this is done as best to my ability, which really is not something that we want to depend on. We want to depend on the actual measurements, right? So you're all familiar with the rules of thumbs. How large of a system do I need? Well, it depends on how far away you are from the house and how many fingers and how big your hand is. These aren't really jokes anymore. People will walk up to the house and be like, oh yeah, I can tell how to do the duct system, and I can tell you how big of a system it is. I've been doing this forever. This is I got it. Meanwhile, homes are on a whole nother level in terms of air tightness, insulation levels, passive house homes. In fact, they're struggling with trying to get units that are small enough to actually be adequate for some of these houses that we're building that are still a good size house. We're not talking about, a mobile home. We're talking about one that you can drive away with. You're talking a 2,000 square foot home that can get away with a 1-ton system. That's actually what contractors are just not willing to accept. In fact, they kind of ignore the entire envelope and orientation. It's what they think is actually the best process. So this may be the report you've gotten from one of your contractors. That is a real drawing on the left. It actually is a good drawing, except that there's nothing to validate that, or I can't confirm that it's following any kind of standard. But I got a commissioning report here. This is refrigerant. Yes, it's in there. I checked it. It's cold. I touched it. Airflow was good and the air was cold. What else do you really want? I mean, I got it. I can tell you right here. I can send you a text if you really want me to document that. And these are our challenges that we have right now. So this is trying to remind you that even if you've recorded on a checklist, there's still nothing without design or the proper operation or what should it be. So if you went to your doctor and he says, of course, they always want to take all your vitals, blood pressure, temperature, all those kind of things. And he took your temperature and you came in not feeling well and it's 104. And he goes, okay, I'm good. I refilled some of those other prescriptions you got. You're on your way. We'll see you back in 6 months. You go ahead and see the person out front and reschedule an appointment and pay for your bill. And 2 days later, you're in the hospital and they're like, wait, what just happened? And your significant other said, hey, he was just at the doctor. And so they go back and see your charts and the doctor clearly wrote down that it was 104. We know that that's high. But unfortunately, contractors are grabbing measurements and not understanding what is the real design and what are the real measurements should be and where's the criteria that they're falling into. So this is not acceptable for your health and it's not acceptable for what we're doing with buildings. There's a lot of time, effort, and expense put into them, let alone the people that are trying to install these and keep track of them. Let's do better as an industry. So what are you measuring? My concept is like, if I was going to give you a list of numbers right here, you'd pull out your calculator and add them all up. But what if they're constantly changing? These are not fixed numbers. You don't just have one set of numbers. So these could be a variety of measurements that you're doing between indoor air temperatures, that's your temperature split, external static, outdoor temperature, suction line temperature, clamps and pressures. All those things are actually giving you lots of numbers. These are not the real numbers, just to make sure we're clear here. It's just an example of how these numbers are constantly changing ever so slightly that give you the reality. So if you were able to see all of these at once, and watch them. I wasn't savvy enough to animate all those little gauges and those numbers, but imagine if they were all changing ever so slightly and one impacts the other. Some of them are direct measurements, some of them are calculated measurements. So if you were able to be super savvy and see all of these at once and determine what's going on and tell me that this system is operating correctly, then I'd be totally blown away. It'd be like saying you can actually add up all these numbers that they changed at the same time. So this is the challenge for an HVAC contractor to really understand that. And we do lots of stuff now. There's so many apps. There's so many things that are actually making our lives and our process better. I'm just disappointed that we're not accepting them as they're just as equal as what I've learned throughout my last 10 or 15 years. All right, so this is my stump concept, but I wanted for you, in fact, one of the things I love about these webinars is that you guys are super active in the chat. When I used to do other webinars for other companies, in fact, we are trying to, many of the logos and the names have been protected to save those so we can record this and actually have it as a video. So those have been redacted all over, but in general, some of them may slip. But the chat is awesome. So what is your stump? What is it that causes you to get up every day and want to move our industry forward? So please share with us what it is that's on your stump and the one thing that you want to see happen in our industry or your process or whatever it is. Just go ahead and do that. So if you're going to capture it, you have to save the real data, save it to the cloud, export the data to some process, generate a report. Even a report gives me something I can validate. And usually I'm able to generate that report, and I can even pull those numbers off of a PDF if I had to. But normally it's like, okay, I got a tool and a probe, I got a measurement device, I have data and cloud, and somehow that's all moving through a process. I can also figure out when and where and who captured it, right? So that's our goal. This is not like, oh, revolutionary. We do this every day with so many of the things we do and all the stuff we're doing at our homes. We're actually now able to figure out where does the materials come from and the embodied energy that's in them as to where they're made, how far they're transported. And yet we're still struggling to figure out what are the measurements for my static pressure for the system that got installed. I just think we can do better. Here's some examples of some of these reports that are out there. So we've got one report on the left, another report on the right, and they're giving me, some of them give me actual grade as to how well that system was installed. They're telling me other systems about the review. They're telling me other processes or problems that it has, what it's finding based upon all of those numbers that I just threw at you, and how they're changing dynamically. And here's kind of a zoom in as to what that kind of looks like. So these are the direct capture measurements that happen. And these actually are going usually back to the cloud. They're on a PDF document. I could actually go back and verify exactly what happened to that system and why it was getting some of the readings it did. These are the things that are just fundamental. Taking a picture of your gauges or even any kind of device is not an actual documentation as to what's there. It's plan B. It's to cover your backside, but it's not actually doing what we're talking about here. It's not a direct capture source. And a screenshot is not a data capture. Just because I have something on my screen and I do a screenshot and I get an image does not actually provide anything that's traceable. There's no metadata. Metadata is anything that's behind it, tells me where, when that was done. You can pull up many of your pictures you take, and if you turned on geolocation, it will tell you where you were standing when you took that. So these kind of quick captures on your screen are not actually a valid process. They work well for like, oh yeah, I was here and this is what I found, but I'm not able to actually verify any of this information. So data integrity is huge. So don't think that this is actually plan B or any plan at all. In each of these apps, it's got great information. I can create a PDF. I can save it to a cloud or save it to a process. That's the goal. Hopefully you're getting the theme here. So design always equals construction. I'm sure you guys are all finding this out, that here's what somebody proposed. Here's the design. They did a manual J. I got a D. I got an S. I got all this stuff. So let's go out to the house and confirm that it looks like that. And many times it does not equal A and B. So these are our challenges. And the reason that many of you that are raters are out there, you're verifying this. Like, okay, we spent the time to do this. Let's verify that it's installed correctly. Not just the heating and cooling system, but everything about this home should really be accountable to what we intended it to be. So now that we know this is not just how things are, we can figure out what's a better way to do this. We have a couple of standards that are here. Many of these are things we all live by. These are nothing new. I'm not introducing anything from any of the standard 5 or standard 9 or all of those kind of stuff. These are established industry minimum of care. This is not the highest level. This really should be the basic level as to what you're trying to achieve. I will acknowledge that some of these are not easy to do. These things take a lot more time and a lot more effort. But if you figure out how much it costs to come back to that system, how fast that system degrades over time, how much it's costing the occupants, not just in energy, but in comfort and other issues that are actually part of their real frustration and anxiety, you realize these standards are actually not that difficult to do. And anything that's a process, that's a well-organized process, is actually goes a lot faster. The first time you do it, yes, it is slow. But after that, you realize, okay, this is how we do it. And many of the things that are in these standards now can be captured directly into a process. So here they are. If you don't know what they are, there's an entire alphabet and number system that's out there based on all these. And there's a variety of them, from existing systems to new and verifying and the protocols. It's all been vetted and been vetted well. And there's many contractors out there. So if you're out there, chime in like, oh yeah, we use this 5, we use the 9, whatever it is that's out there. 12 is something that I believe has been written into a variety of stuff that's out there in terms of maybe the IRA. You can kind of confirm that in the background. But these are just the processes by which we have and compare to. In the beginning, this was it. You finally have those standards. Those are your QA process. I can actually do it. And this is where we're headed now. So the concept is that we've converted to this verified process, and it can be Energy Star or not. So you can have a verified system performance, right, for an existing home, and for a new home. And if it's a new home and you're doing Energy Star, then you've got your Energy Star verified HVAC install. The new one, which is kind of, hey, guess what? This is something new. Glad you joined us today. This is a verified equipment operation quality install. Okay, meaning that the one in the middle means that I actually verified that it actually had the design, and the design was met based upon the install that was there. This is the size of the system. This is the unit. This is the model number. All those are confirmed. We tried to figure out a way, is there something that actually could verify this unit is operating correctly? I didn't do a design on it. I don't have all the details, but for an existing home, can I verify this system is operating correctly? That's the new one that's out there. So I'm sure it'll hit the press soon. There's lots of great information about these, but in general, know that these are at your options on how to achieve these. Okay, so I'll give some quick quotes. Yeah, let me. So if you're not familiar with Edwards Deming,
what, Joe, real quick, if it's all right.
Yeah.
I wanted to just chime in real quick on a couple things, going back to what you were saying in the beginning part with the HVAC contractor trainings. So real quick on that, just because I feel like you had mentioned in the beginning, and really we're back to the beginning again, aren't we? Because I think there's been a renewed look at these credentials. If you think about the Inflation Reduction Act now under the 45L, I've got a meeting today with someone about 45L. We're going to be looking at these heating and cooling contractors having these, at least just the foundational credentials, right? And then hopefully moving them towards the utilizing these types of services to have these direct measurement captures. So from a lead standpoint, as I mentioned earlier on in the session, we're looking at having additional points for having that certified contractor. So it's not required. So that's the one part that lead throws out. And that's why they say you don't have to be certified to Energy Star. You just simply have to meet all the requirements short of having this credentialed HVAC contractor. And you can get a bonus point if you do that. And so there's on the Energy Star website, there are 2 ways to achieve that. And so they go through the trainings on there on how to get these credentials. But the thing about these credentials and the concerns that we have, and I think even EPA is recognizing, and we're going to talk a little bit about the future, is that number one, for the most part, there's not like a continuing ed component to it. And number two, there isn't any kind of verification. Again, it's just those documents, those paperwork being filled out, right? And we're hoping that they captured the correct data. But with the renewed calls for the Inflation Reduction Act under 45L, this is currently the way to access those dollars. This is the current standing, but that is changing quickly. And a lot of the things we're talking about today is the direction that that's going. So I just wanted to make sure I clarified that before you moved on, Joe. So thanks for bearing with me.
Not a problem. Anytime. You chime in anytime. Is there any kind of questions or anything in the chat that we should address real quick?
Not related to this, but I think it is related to something else you're going to bring up that we'll get to. So yeah.
Got it. And Cindy, I've actually said verified 22 times, just so we're on the same page. So to me, when somebody introduced me to Edward Demings years ago, and we go through these processes, like, oh, that contractor, he doesn't know what he's doing, or I immediately go to Edward Demings because it's people don't fail. It's rare that somebody gets up and I'm going to go install a crappy system today. It's not how we're built. It's not what we do. So that's one of the things I wanted to make sure that we addressed as part of our concept today. So hopefully I'm sharing again. Are we good?
There, it's back again. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So Edwards Demings is if you go ahead and Google him, because you're going to be blown away by the things that he believes in, that people don't fail, the process fails the people. That's really the concept here. So the reason that you're adopting some of these standards are going to go into some of the stuff we're talking about. So it's training, it's repeatability, it's quality control, visual business evaluation and success. If you're not following those standards, you don't have the ability to teach the people who are doing these installs what they should be doing and how to do that. And to me, providing examples and showing them You really can't be trained. So everybody goes out in so many industries and does it a certain way. And chances are, as an electrician, you probably could get away with different wire nuts or different things, or how you decide what's going to get connected or wired. But for an HVAC industry, it's really, if you want your company to be follow a process, you must follow the standards and then make sure it's implemented and trained. It's shocking to me how many companies do not have an in-house system that they use to train on, to making sure all of their technicians are doing the same measurements, the same process, communicating the same way, documenting the same stuff. With or without any of the apps I've got, there's ways you can document this as a first start process. So if you're not doing that and you don't have examples in your shop as to be like, okay, when you're done, these are the details. This is what it should look like, so that when they go to a home, they're able to follow a standard and they have a visual and they have a focus as to this is what it should look like. So for those companies that are yet to accept that I should have something in my shop that people can actually play with, test, use, and to see as the final product, then that's really the challenge. So, many of these things have been out for a long time. We kind of accepted them, but we're not actually getting the information out of them directly. And as we'll keep commenting, verified that they were installed. All right. So I tried to read my slides, but hopefully you can, because you can read probably faster than I could. So this is one of Jim Bergman's philosophies, and I think it's a great philosophy, that when you have these standards, you're taking the value from your technician and you place it into the business. I'll say that again. I'm sure you're reading it. So you're taking the value from the technician and placing it into the business. So you're not just hoping that every one of your technicians are out there and putting values and following these processes, but you as the business are the owner of what they're doing and making sure that they are well trained, they have the resources and the ability to go out and provide this install and everything working correctly. And that's what you're responsible for. You shouldn't depend on your technician to have suddenly learn that. Again, back to Deming, it's the process that fails, not the technician or the person. So there is a concept that's happening between this company on the right and this kind of company on the left, that in order to do this and get direct capture and direct confirmation, is that you're actually able to put some information in and go and actually do direct measurements and confirm that you actually passed and got this certifications, right? This is where we're at. This has actually been promoted for a little longer than it should have been, because we're still trying to figure out some beta stuff and all the technical stuff. So if you're looking for that, you can reach out to Val at measurequick.com. She's the person who's trying to find more people who can help us vet some of this stuff. So if you're looking for that, that's there. And this is what it looks like. You saw this kind of in the beginning, that Brett kind of brought this up. So this is somebody on the left who says they designed this system and the technician confirming that it's installed. Notice that we have check boxes. All right. Yes, it's checked. It's installed. I wrote down some information. I got a make, model, serial number. I've confirmed square footage, BTUs. Anything here could actually be written in and confirmed, and you can copy from A to B, Appendix A and Appendix B, whatever it is the concept. This is where we're headed, that you can actually enter this information online and somebody can go out in the field and actually verify that it is actually installed correctly. That's the goal. That's where we're headed. This is going to be a major game changer, because one of the things we're trying to make sure people do is that you go to install that system, your designer already told you the make of it and the model number. And many people are installing this without actually confirming what's on the data plate or what's on the outside of the box. They're installing the wrong system. And people are saying, oh, well, it's good enough. But it's not, because it may not be what they designed to have in the house. It may not fit their needs. It may be oversized or undersized. So one of the things that's hard to get a technician to do is stop, read the data label, and confirm that this is actually what's supposed to be installed here at this system. And there actually is a place to confirm, yes, this is it. And you take a picture of it. So you're going to enter, you see what was designed, and then you enter what was actually there as the process. So I can actually says yes. And there's an automatic thing that pops up that says, yes, this is the system that was designed. You're going to install this system, or no, this is not the system that's designed. But by the time you get to that data plate, it may be too late. You've already put your line set in. Oh yeah, Edwards is back. So again, great information here. He's a wealth of resources. Anytime, again, there's a challenge about, anything with technicians or the process or whatever, I throw him out and move it at that. So I'm going to move into some technology stuff real quick about that. So I left the logo in there. So I'll move past that quickly. So what tools are you using? So if you were going to go to the hospital and they use this stethoscope over on the left, versus maybe one of the ones in the middle or even one on the right, it's kind of, you're like, wow, I was expecting better service from my hospital, from my doctor. There's a standard of care that actually gets updated. In fact, if you are going to a lawsuit and they're like, wow, that person had a heart palpitation, and you're like, well, my stethoscope is from my grandfather. And you'd be like, well, that's not the standard of care. So there is a governing standard of care. Many of those are the standards that I showed you a few minutes ago. That is what the industry is implying or expecting contractors to be using. So if you're not using it, you say, oh no, we don't use that. We don't believe in that. I didn't know about it. None of that is actually considered to be defensible if you have a really poor install. Like, what did you do to verify that? And this image would be very similar. That this is something that is fading away. The amount of refrigerant loss that happens inside of these hoses, right, is shocking. The global warming potential, it could be in the trillions of pounds that gets left in these. And the reality is that we're moving to multiple new refrigerants. Okay. So if you didn't vet these and clean out these lines, which is allowing all these refrigerants to get out, imagine every time you did a service call, they're filled with refrigerant and of course, I always release my lines. Well, that's not a good thing either. And the new probes that are out there are small. They don't actually hold it. They don't have the hoses anymore, the tubes. So we don't have that problem, right? So these are some of the things that we're vetting. With our new refrigerants, you can have refrigerant A in here, and then you go to refrigerant B in there, and we're going to end up with a lot of cross-contamination. Even if you clean your lines well, there still could be the risk of that happening. So we are headed towards a real new mess. I'm not even going to go into the whole heat pump house not being prepared for heat pump or all the other issues that were actually probably been covered on other stuff that Brett and his great presenters have covered. This is going to be a new challenge for our industry. If we don't get our act together soon, consumers are eventually going to just say, you know what, it's not what I want to do. I want something different. I want to go back to the way it was. It was working fine. So this is my concert of instruments. There's a variety of stuff that's out there. You can mix or match and use them as you need to. So there are 3 apps. My animation kind of failed because I had to change some stuff at the end here. But anyway, these are some of the apps that are out there. I try to cover the manufacturers for compliance. But in general, all of these are actually giving me stuff that I can actually track. That's kind of the goal. There may be other apps out there. If there are, please throw them in the chat window. That's what these kind of sessions are about, sharing information with each other. So many of them are only proprietary to their middle section or to their own section, left and the middle. The one on the right can actually work with almost any many of the wireless devices that are out there. So some are multi-brand and some are very brand specific. It's not just the HVAC side that actually has been doing this, because there's parts of 310, the standard 310 that we'll talk about in a second, and that's actually duct testing and confirmation of airflow. But duct testing is one the raters have been doing as long as I've been around this industry. So, and there's auto data capture for both of the manufacturers that are selling duct testers and duct blasters. So that's actually been done a long time. They got it. They're doing it. And now let's figure out a way to incorporate other stuff as part of the 310 as part of this process. Some of the systems that are out there are benchmarking it, meaning that you do your install and I can benchmark this system is operating based on the manufacturer's recommendations, criteria, and it's in the best place that it could be, right? And then when we come back to service this unit, I know what its benchmark is, meaning that I do not have to tap the refrigerant charge on there anymore. I can actually just hook up the temperatures that are on the line set, not the actual pressure probes that are actually doing the refrigerants. And I can determine if it's still within compliance of the original install based upon a non-invasive mode. So once I benchmarked it, I can now say, okay, I'm coming back to this system for years and years to confirm that it's in the benchmark. And if it's not, then maybe I have to tap the system now and figure that out. The amount of times we're tapping systems is just crazy when we don't really need to. But in order to do a non-invasive mode, because we're able to do temperatures and pressures together, or one can be calculated to the other, is to know that the system was operating originally correctly. So that's the best place to do a non-invasive. Non-invasive, again, it's just temperature only on the line set. And once I have this process, now I'm able to do a variety of conditions on there. So I can confirm what's there and know whether or not I've got problems and do diagnostics and confirms. This is a great way to do maintenance. It's a great way to do compliance. And guess what? It's also the option that we actually can do with 310. So a lot of this stuff is actually coming together. I know 310 it's been taking forever to get there. It's been out for a while, but we're now seeing that everybody realizes that this is the future of the process. So here is the ANSI, ResNet, ACCA, ICC, 310, 2020. I know it's due for every 3 years. These things get updated. It's 2023. This needs to get updated. There's not a lot that's extreme on this, but there are some things that need to get changed. So I imagine there'll be a committee gathering sometime, hopefully later this year, to go back and evaluate some of the things that were in there that we just couldn't see 3 years ago. Now that the thing's getting used, we need to do some of these updates. This is going to change the HVAC industry because the people that are doing many of this compliance are not HVAC technicians, right? The concept here is that for the first time, and ResNet, HERS raters are now able to do things that they normally weren't really focused on, okay? They've been doing duct testing forever. They've probably been doing the manual J and the calculations and the manual D or S, all those kind of things. If they're not HERS rater, they're probably working for HERS rater. They have a good relationship. They understand what's happening now. That design criteria is built into all the compliance software that's out there now. And they go do the duct tests. They also verify lots of other stuff. But the blower fan airflow, that's actually the amount of flow going through the air handler. There's a variety of ways to measure that. And that's not too difficult for a HERS rater to figure out and do a grade on it. Also able to be documented. Same with this fan watt draw. In fact, if you do one, you probably do the other. The greatest challenge for HERS raters is that they usually don't mess with electrical. They now have to open up and get some electrical readings. If they coordinate with the HVAC contractor and they install it, knowing this is going to happen, that they can actually provide safe leads that are able to be tapped onto and do this. Because when you do one, you want to do the other. It's kind of the goal here. And then we get to one of the major problems. I mean, in the beginning, I talked about all of the studies that were all about airflow, right? That's including duct leakage, but in general, the fan, the blower motors were not actually doing the proper airflow. That's also related to the refrigerant charge. It's not as though they're totally separate. If you have a problem with one, you probably have a problem with the other. If I've got restrictive airflow inside, I probably have issues with my refrigerant charge showing up outside. That doesn't mean you change your refrigerant charge. You need to figure out what is a system-wide approach to find out what's the problem. Okay, so refrigerant charge is now in something that's people were like, no, that's not me. So there is a way to do this. I will throw out the exception. I know that Florida or Texas or whatever is saying HERS raters can't even look at the systems, but we think that there might be some way to compromise it or do that, or we need to now be on top of the HVAC contractor, right, to do a weigh-in verification. These are supposed to go in order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, do this, confirm that. Okay, you pass, move to the next one. But 5 is done before 2 is done. This system is installed, it's charged, it's ready to go. It's probably providing dehumidification or cooling during the install. Hopefully the registers are covered. And then you go back and you do 2, 3, 4 and come back to 5 and confirm the weigh-in. So when this was actually installed, if you were on top of your game, you actually had your contractor do a great job of weighing it in. Some people do their charge based upon superheat or subcool or some other requirement for the install for that manufacturer. That doesn't cut it in terms of what we're trying to do here for this verification. It's a weigh-in verification. So if they're able to do that, then you're able to have your documentation really ahead of it as long as it's done and verified correctly, right? So there is some learning curves that's happening here. If it is a standard system or a heat pump in cooling mode, then you can actually do a non-invasive test here and confirm the refrigerant charge was compliant based upon the install, and actually a HERS rater can do that as long as they're able to touch the system. So those are our goals. This is what we're after, is that you actually have a true third party, and sometimes it's the person who doesn't really know a lot about the system who can tell you what's wrong with the system. So sometimes the person who installed it is not the best person to tell you that it's going great or everything's fine. Trust me, it's good. I've been installing this for 20 years. Now we're actually able to verify these conditions. These are some of the concepts that are happening. This is our beta process, right? So that you do your design, somebody does the criteria, they confirm that's what's met. Now we're actually able to do the duct leakage And notice at the top, we're saving this stuff to the cloud. That one person may go out and do a duct leakage, all right? Then somebody else may come out and do the blower fan and the airflow, and you'd use the TrueFlow grid. Other ones are out there, but in general, the TrueFlow grid is a easily documented direct capture. Clamp on watt meter is your next one for the watt draw. Again, direct capture. And then the other two are either the non-invasive for Hertz rater, direct capture, or the weigh-in, which have already been done by your contractor. So the goal is that one person could probably come out and do this in a matter of an hour, maybe two, worst case, or you've actually done this in piecemeal. That, okay, I did the duct leakage test, and then somebody else came out and did something else, and maybe the refrigerant charge is already done, or somebody else came back and did that. So the goal is this can be done in parts and pieces and gathered into a single source and a single report, or each one of them is verified by a process. That's our goal with the 310. We're not there yet, but I feel highly confident this time next year, it will be. This will be a process that lots of people can use and get direct measurements that are verified and accountable. And I think that's it for me. I know you got some comments and some questions, Brett.
Well, no, thank you, Joe. Before we get into the formal questions, I just did want to remind everyone, and I think it was a slide back I missed, but to be sure that 310 standard is really a new way to look at achieving, I think most importantly, the Inflation Reduction Act dollars. So again, if you're trying to go after especially the DOE Zero Energy Ready certification program under the Inflation Reduction Act 45L, you're trying to get, you and your clients, you're trying to get that energy score, that energy rating index number lower is better, right? You're doing everything you can. And so having the heating, the rater in collaboration, I think, Joe, I appreciate that. And I want to go back to that in a little bit, but in collaboration with the HVAC, doing these measurements and assuming everything is under, grade 1, right? That's the direction you want to be. Then you can actually pick up potentially, I've heard upwards of maybe 6 or more energy points or reduction in energy points by having a properly functioning system. And so again, that makes it easier to achieve that 45L Zero Energy Ready, because you're trying to get it down to a low number of around 40 or so. That's pre-solar, if solar is added or not. So this is real. This is real money. This is upwards of $5,000 per unit. Did you want to add to that, Joe?
Yeah. So I did call Dean the other day. It's always good to talk to people about stuff you're talking about, to be like confirm stuff. So his concept is, as you see across here, that some are tolerance are met, grade 1 or grade 2 across the board. Grade 3 means you failed, no points for you is the concept. So his concept is a grade 1 gets you the most points, obviously. If you fail one of them, then you don't get those points. But the one thing that was an eye opener, I'll make sure we're on the same page, and that is that in the South, you're using this system a lot more than in the North. You're going to get more points if you're in the South. So this actually encouraging, Southern contractors to get their game together. People in the North may not get as many points because you're not using the systems as much. And it is conditional upon probably heat pump versus air conditioner. It's a very complex matrix as to what they've got, as to how many points you get. But you're right, it is a fair amount of points you can get by just confirming that it was installed the way it should have been.
Right. Yeah, no, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And, and in the context of LEED, again, the annual energy use, if you're trying to score higher in your LEED certification, you're trying to drive down that energy rating. And there was a fantastic question here, almost like a trade-off question, right? Like, is it you can get 1 point for having a credentialed HVAC, but we know most of the HVAC drag them in kicking and screaming to get that credential. And in fairness, they don't got time to do it. And you have to pay a fee and all that. So, okay, is it the verifier, the rater who's doing it instead? If you had to pick, obviously we want both, right? That's the idea, right? Everybody's working together on this. But if you had to pick, there are additional points here for the energy rating, which of course is going to reduce or improve your LEED score as well. Using the 310 standard and having the rater verify that. So yeah, that's kind of the direction we want to go. And so we can head into the Q&A now. if that's all right, unless you had anything else to add, Joe.
No, hopefully we answered some of your questions and, promise that where we're headed in the future.
Yeah. So we're going to get into those questions real quick. And just as a reminder, this session is getting recorded. You can watch it again on our YouTube channel. Click subscribe. You'll get an instant update when it's available. If you would like to get that, you can share it with your friends, colleague on LinkedIn if you'd like. For those of you watching this in the future, not right now, but on demand, take your quiz with an 80% passing rate. You can find that on our USGBC or Thinkific channel. You will receive your certificate. For those of you here and you've been here for the entire CEU approved hour, you've properly logged into Zoom, you have the name on your Zoom that you want written on your certificate, check your spam in the next couple of days. For certs@gutenbergcerts.com, you'll receive your CEU and be able to report it. And before we get into those questions coming in, again, a huge thanks to our board of directors, our volunteers, our executive director, Jose Reyna, and all of our top tier sponsors, especially Mitsubishi, Rheem, April Air, all of our sponsors who are going to help you build better, some of them helping you achieve some of these goals for better HVAC performance as well. So, Joe, I wanted to go back to a question that did come in. And it was just, again, we're kind of looking at this world now where and I want to talk a little bit more about this, where we're looking at like, what is the HVAC doing? What is verifying? What is the rater doing, right? In the event there's raters, we have millions of existing homes where there may not be raters, right? And I think that's another point here, is that the HVAC are getting in and properly commissioning all these systems in all of these homes when they're redoing the system, updating it, or I assume coming for a call, right? And saying, hey, I got a call, an AC outage call, or whatever it might be. But anyway, but when we're talking about involving the raters from a certification standpoint, having them trying to figure out, okay, who's doing what? And so the question that came up specifically in this context was, you had sort of set off the cuff something about Florida and Texas. And I just, the question, the speaker or the person who asked it just wondered if you could give some more clarity on it. I will say here in Michigan, and I'm going to pick on every single certified energy rater in Michigan right now. I'm about to do that. I can do that. I'm from here. All of them have told me they are not interested in having any involvement or taking on any liability of evaluating the HVAC system anymore. Even one of them said no comment. That's how much they didn't want to do it when I asked them, hey, are you going to do the 310 standard? So that really shifts us back to the HVAC, at least here. But it looks like, Joe, as you said, Florida, Texas, they can't even, is that like a law, or what? Is that an Energy Star thing?
No. Those locations, I know Texas for sure. You can't touch the system unless you're an licensed HVAC contractor in Texas. I've also heard that for Florida, and there may be other states that are out there. So if you're out there, chime in. Like, you let us know. The only people that can actually assess your systems, touch your system, even take off a cover, in theory, have to be a licensed HVAC contractor. So that's completely limiting a variety of stuff that's always been out there. Even doing duct testing has been a major challenge for these areas, because even code was requiring you got to do a duct test. In the beginning, they're like, oh, no, you got to be licensed to do that. So they did do some compromises, to my understanding. But in general, these things have been something that has to be negotiated. So, it's not as though ResNet doesn't have much pull. So they've been able to try and overcome some of that. So the challenge will be that. So in theory, so if we're going to talk about that, you're trying to reduce your points, okay, and you're using the 310, the points you're trying to reduce are part of the HERS software. Right. So if you want to get those points, and the HERS rater is going to enter that information, they don't have to do the measurements. They just have to know where they came from. All right. Hopefully they've validated them. If not, they just get a piece of paper or whatever is saying those things. So the reality is that they could get them from anybody. Any of these things can be gotten from anybody. There's no restrictions in the 310 as to who does it. It's all goes back to who enters it into the HERS software. That's the accountability that comes into play. So just because you don't have a HERS rater in that area, anybody who can validate this can do it. And that information is, written down and put back into the software. So there is no direct capture at all there. So Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, and I kind of want to, bring in another line of thought here about what you had said, where again, someone installs a new system, they have the appropriate measurements documented as we talked about, we hope will happen. And then they come back later to either improve that system or do the annual checkup, or the person wants to upgrade, right? A tax credit came out or at the end of its life. It sounds like what you were saying is that if it's appropriately captured, they don't have to redo all that information. They have it. Am I putting that correctly?
Yeah, but the question is that is it still valid? Like say, so you install a system and you chose not to get the ESVI, the Energy Star verified install. You from what you missed it, right?
Okay.
So you can come back years later on an existing home and still do that. But it's not as though I can go back and get it from a year ago. It's actually at the time of assessment, right? So if I come back a year later, I can do it, but I had to remeasure the system in order to get that certificate because it's based upon.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about the certificate. I'm just talking about, again, we're talking about all these millions of homes. We need to update their HVAC or a brand new home. And again, I think the point you were making is you can capture that data and you can access it much easier than if you weren't using a direct capture tool. Did I hear that?
Yeah, that's right. So now that are we past our time that we can actually mention things and names? Is that where you?
Oh yeah, go for it. Whatever you want to say. Yeah.
So I showed you multiple apps. Many of those apps are just giving you direct data from their direct probes, right? Which is great, but they're not telling you the thresholds. They're not telling you where the measurement should be. They say if you're good or bad, or and they're also not doing a variety of diagnostics. I showed you that list of all those gauges. We're actually giving you in-depth diagnostics. That is Measure Quick. We're giving you in-depth diagnostics about that system, right? So we can tell you that, guess what, we don't have any major faults, and you benchmark the system, meaning every time that contractor, that specific contractor comes back to that system, he can be determining that it was based upon the benchmark at the time of install. Or best service. So that's actually your goal, which we don't do now. We're just come back, throw on the gauges and hope for the best. And usually they're going to get refrigerant and putting it in, or sometimes taking it out, never even looking at the air handler, never confirming airflow. There's just a variety of non-holistic approaches that we're still struggling with. But I think you're alluding to the concept now that I can verify that system is operating correctly. And if I have the information, I could verify that it's operating based on its design. But in theory, I may not have that. That's lost information, and that home maybe has changed in the last time that we thought about that. But I can verify that system is operating as it was intended, based on the profile and what I know about that. That's our goal,
right?
Yeah,
and so what I'm kind of getting at is sort of the information handoff. So in the event of a rater working with HVAC, you're kind of right, you're sort of still in that time period where people are under contract, they're wrapping things up. So hopefully there's a good line of communication, but could it be that in this, and especially going back to the concern about the states where the rater can't touch it. So you said heating and cooling contractor, they can put in all the data. Perhaps there's a way that then the rater can access that on the back end and feed it into the energy rating thing that they need, right? But then going beyond that, I'm just thinking like, okay, what if someone hires a different HVAC to commission their system in the future or install a new one, or they go to sell their house and they want to communicate that data in some way? Is this kind of set up to be handed off to others across companies, or how could that work?
No, yeah, it's really not. It's so for like Measure Quick, it's like you are the contractor. That was your data, and any of your technicians can come back and reopen up that job and do that. But I can't just easily pass that on to the next person, as well as you can see how people would just want to steal all their information. So
yeah. So there really would need to be the original contractor involved at some point, company anyway, to
but I still want to stress though that your system is operating based upon the existing indoor and outdoor conditions right now. So even if you were going to sell your house, or buy that house, you want to verify. That was great that it was an Energy Star verified install 5 years ago, but what's it doing today? So those are your challenges, because you have so many things that could be going wrong there. There could be some small leak. They never changed the filters in 5 years. There's just so many conditions that are based upon the install and the occupants as to whether or not they maintained it. So those are the real challenges.
Is there a section to validate the use of nitrogen during the line set brazing process to ensure system cleanliness?
Yeah, there is. That's a little over my head, just to clarify. But there is a process that by which we use another app to confirm that it was properly set up. So when we send out, if you send out stuff, I can actually provide more information. Maybe Valerie's in the background and she can actually start throwing that out as the answer. So
Yeah, and then are these systems compatible with refrigerant systems that have or variable speed compressors?
yeah, so they are, and I actually had a slide on that, and I took it out. And for time, in fact, I've never finished early. I actually finished with time to talk. That was the first time. But the issue is that these systems, you can imagine that if I had my car in idle and you were trying to tell how well the engine was operating, it's really not the best, or in second gear, or whatever it is. That if you really want to find out what its capacity is, it needs to be in its test mode, not its full operation, because even that may not be it either. And for most of these systems, they have to be done in the cooling mode in its test mode, meaning that it's at its full capacity. So I can now understand and do the measurements correctly, and based upon now I know what the size, the metering device, all these things come into play as my profile, and say, okay, I now know how well it's operating. But you can do a heat pump in heating mode, but it's not based upon the manufacturer specs in terms of refrigerant charge. It's based upon cooling mode. It's a cooling device that runs backwards to give you heat. So according to the manufacturers, they say run it in cooling mode. So if you install it in January, they do their best guess. Sometimes they will know exactly how much refrigerant to measure in, but when you come back to do that in spring to do your maintenance, you should be confirming that my charge is correct, and that can be done with a non-invasive assessment. So.
Speaking of manufacturers and invasive assessments, you know, the comment here is that manufacturers don't want these refrigerant gauges connected to their startup when they have you know, the factory sealed package systems. And so if you can speak to that, and then specifically to ground source heat pump or geothermal systems, you know, how or could those be done?
Yeah, so remind me about the geothermal in a second. So the problem is that all these manufacturers are saying we've got diagnostics built in, it's all good, but everybody's asking for a third-party verification. And the third-party diagnostics that are built in are probably not as equivalent as to what somebody's connecting with their $200 probe. So you can say there's a challenge there. That $200 probe could also be a challenge. So unless your goal is trust but verify. That's my philosophy. I'm sure you've heard before. I'm sure it's operating correctly. Your information I can see on the thermostat is telling me exactly what I need to know. But according to the compliance process, I need to verify that nothing's off. And that's where the challenge goes. That's where you're, for the first time, hooking up your gauges, tapping the refrigerant, unfortunately. And hopefully you're not using the hoses. You're just using the probe. That's very small, less of a loss, except for the psh that happens in the beginning and end. So, but it's just the reality that people want to know for sure that that was installed correctly from a third party process. So that's the reality. So,
well, and I, you know, before we transition to the geothermal question, I wanted to, I mean, do you foresee in the future, you've got Energy Star, right, certifying things. Do you foresee them adapting anything that would kind of go further into this at all?
Well, I mean, the units, it's the install. Like, you know, there are these devices, you know, you talked about earlier about these mini splits that are pre-charged, and you get 25 feet, you know, use it carefully, and you're done. So those are probably the easiest exception. And I'll just pause for a moment to be like, so everybody says, oh yeah, everything's mini split. We do mini split. We do mini split. And like, we used to try to measure it. It doesn't measure quick. And there's lots of kind of ways you can do it. But the reality is we kept digging in. And we actually found to the highest level at Mitsubishi and Daikin and anybody who makes these dang things, that they couldn't tell us what the suction line, liquid line, vapor lines, you know, all these kind of lines really should be reading and where, and that they're actually changing dynamically. So they were like, well, we actually don't know, because the owners are not here in America, and they're like, that's just proprietary information. So they know it's correct. Leave it alone. In fact, if you call for support, they'll be like, take it all out and put it all back in. which is not really the best thing we're trying to do for the environment, because that's when accidents happen. But in
Mm.
general, we're hoping that because of these things requiring that we're trying to do third-party verification, that we'll get somewhere. So it could easily be another year or two before they are able to give us the measurements that we should be able to tap into that system and get. But right now, it's a little not even worthy of trying to figure out. It's in MeasureQuick as a beta now, because some people are still trying to use it. There are ways to do electrical measurements to give you a best guess, but in general, it's just not what the manufacturers really want us to doing. Is they don't want you to tap the system. So just take it out, put it back in.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's stay on with manufacturers real quick for this other question. And I think you've kind of alluded to a lot of it, but again, it's just the question is, how do you adapt your software to specific manufacturers' charging instructions? So again, just all of these different manufacturers have differing approaches. Does your system have a database of different manufacturer modules kind of pre-made?
Yeah, so how you do your charging method is based upon that manufacturer, and that contractor follows that.
Yeah.
Once it's done, then you can enter some basic criteria about the system, and I can confirm that what you have is operating at that requirement. So we don't actually follow those details. We're not here to tell you how to charge the system. We're here to tell you that your system has got the proper charge and proper airflow, and other conditions that are happening, and your electrical readings are not they're in line to tell you your electrical usage. All those are just based upon, okay, you're done. Let's verify your install.
So again, we talked about the challenges with mini splits, and so there's the other exception, I think, that gets. So again, I should remind everybody, if you're trying to, at least at this time, get away with having to do not so much commissioning on Energy Star mini splits, number one. Number two, ground source heat pumps, to my knowledge, I think sort of get you away from having to do some of this. But what's coming for that, or what thoughts do you have there?
Yeah, so we last year started ground source heat pump. It's in us as a beta. And we're following that is a whole world all by itself. That's incredibly complicated. So the easiest way for me to like get your anybody out there's direct questions that are over my head is to just reach out to Jim at MeasureQuick.com. That's Jim Bergman. He gladly will love to give you more information about that. We're working with water furnace and a variety of other methods and processes now. So again, there is, just as you could talk about furnaces, the whole concept of ground source heat pump is a whole gamut in itself. So we're trying to get better at that. We're looking for more contractors who want to test what we've got or give us feedback. So we're very open to that. So right now it's a beta method, but it's in the app, and it'll only get better based upon your feedback.
A question came in, and I've heard about this being discussed before, and I want to kind of kick it to you, and I don't know if it's something you all are looking into or where your thoughts of this going, but I'm just retooling the question a little bit to kind of phrase it what I think the intent is to say, where are we headed towards just sort of perhaps sort of self-commissioning systems, or at least systems that are just giving us consistent feedback and maybe even alerting us if there's a problem, so we know, right? We have temperature controls, right? We get temperature, we get humidity controls, we get air quality sensors. Now I have smart ventilation systems, right? It senses bad air quality, it kicks on, my range hood kicks something on, right? There's that sort of feedback and action. It's sending me alerts. We have automatic smart wattage meters, right? It's just measuring down to the kilowatt in real time where our energy is being used in our home. So where are we headed with these types of metrics, to some extent just being reported continuously, or sending an email out to the HVAC company, and then they go, oh, hey, I saw there was an issue. What's going on? Let's check your system. Like, are we headed to that ever?
Well, there are a lot of systems out there that are doing that now in their diagnostics already, and alerting the contractor, and they're expensive. They're the high-end systems, okay? But everything works its way back down to these. They're just now constant installs. But there is a third-party app that we feel strongly enough that we partnered with them, and that's a Smart AC. You can look them up. They have their own website. You can actually find out from through MeasureQuick on Smart AC, but they are
Mm.
incredibly simplified version that they focus on the temperature split in the system. So you're putting one little device, looks like a little bar of soap, in where your return is. So I'm now able to do a small pressure diagnostics in terms of your filter being loaded and the temperature that's in your return. And you find a supply on the other side. It's a Wi-Fi system. There's an app for the occupant and an app for the contractor. And it's telling you, if you just start with the basics, they will create algorithms based upon how it's operating correctly. And if you install it with Measure Quick, we already know what your temperature split should be and how the system is operating at its best. You install the system, and now it's actually monitoring at the most basic level and learning rapidly on how you use your home and how you use your system. So if something is changed, I don't need to know that it is a certain capacitor or one little section of the board that may be failing like other in-depth systems can do. It just says, there's a problem. You need to send the contractor out. I need to come visit your house. I'm getting a condition here. So it also allows the homeowner to say, hey, your filters are dirty. You need to replace it. Would you like to order one online or have your contractor come and install it? So I think it's the beginning of how lots of people wish that they had these kind of maintenance agreements or understandings. Wow, my paint is fading on the backside of my house. I wish I had something to tell me that because I'm not looking at it. So I think that's the goal of what Smart AC is doing. Is it's in the background, it's blind, it's only alerting you when you have an issue, and send somebody out to figure out what. Now you should do a full diagnostics if you've got something. Temperature split means something else has actually changed.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I really appreciate your time and going through all this with us and educating this. And, I certainly learned a lot. Again, just before we head out, where can people go to either reach out to you? You mentioned a couple, but just reiterate, where can people go to reach out and learn more?
Yeah, you can send me a direct email at joe@measurequick.com. Not complicated. You can go to measurequick.com and find a wealth of information. I would gladly get on a call with you. They usually take about an hour, maybe a little over an hour, to do a live demo if you want to learn more about how it works and what it does and all the integration. So that's really my role, is to figure that out. It's to either to make a client success manager and trainer all rolled in one, but don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here to figure out what is your best process to implement standards that will change your company and your bottom line.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Joe. Take care, everyone. Glad to see you out there, and we'll catch you next week. So,
Brett, thank you for everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Be sure to check out all of our courses available online that you can watch anytime and anywhere to pick up your CEUs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to get weekly updates and stay up to date on green building science courses, webinars, and home tours. Thanks again.